Secretary, can you give us a roll call?
Mr. Sprecher,
Here.
Ms. Hallett,
Here.
Ms. Ryan,
Here.
Mr. Mrazinski.
Here. Okay. Is there any public comments right now that are just general? Anybody wants to talk to it? Okay, I guess we can go to the quasi judicial. Ask the attorney to read the quasi judicial stuff.
This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Heritage Preservation Board acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any members of the board wishing to disclose any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest this evening?
No.
Seeing none, if anyone wishing to speak this evening would please stand and raise their right hand to be sworn in.
Are you going to be speaking?
Anyone else wishing to speak if you are an applicant?
Okay.
Do you swear or affirm that do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So sworn.
Okay. Okay, first off, we have application 2143. This is for 28 West Center Street. They've asked for a continuance till June 7th, which has been approved. Okay. So that's just mainly for the record. Second, we have an application 2144. This is for 118 East Orange Street, a replacement of windows, doors, additional metal railings, and it's a contributing structure. I'd like staff, can you give us a brief on this?
Here, let me. And just for clarification, on the first application that was continued, it has been continued to a date certain of June 7th, 2021. Just want to make sure that's clear for the record so we don't have to worry about re-advertising.
Oh, didn't I say that?
I don't recall you saying that, but
Okay.
if you did, we just got it double covered now.
Okay, no problem.
All right. And for application 2144, I'll be sharing my screen. And okay. This one, application 2144 is for a property at 118 East Orange Street. And this is the location where it is. And a location in the historic district. Many of you know this property as the Tea House. This is a masonry vernacular contributing structure built in around 1925. It's got a rear addition about the 1960s, and it's got a contributing cottage in the back constructed around 1950. The applicant would like to replace the windows and doors on both of the structures that are there, and also bring the porch railing on the front principal structure up to code by raising the height. And this just shows basically the components of the property: the original building, the 1960s addition from just my kind of conjecture of where that is, and the 1950s outbuilding. This is the picture of the property from the street. And the master site file notes this as a masonry vernacular. It's been referred to, in fact, our own survey refers to it as French Creole. But it is a masonry vernacular with Greek Revival and French Creole style elements added to it, according to our guidelines. This looks at it from the side. I'm guessing that that southernmost portion is the 1960s edition, but this just kind of shows the building from the west side. This is the contributing cottage in the back, built around the 1950s. It shows the back of that. It's kind of incorporated into the wall that surrounds the property. It's kind of interesting. So as far, I took a kind of account of the windows and doors. It may not be exact, but the applicant can clarify anything that I misstate or leave out. We're looking at replacement really of all the windows and doors that exist on the property. So you've got the original and outbuilding. The materials we're looking at would be aluminum for a storefront door that's going to go on the front, and then fiberglass doors for the rest of the doors, and then vinyl single hung 1/1 windows, and then the metal aluminum to match the railing that's there. These are just your guidelines that are most applicable and your review criteria. So starting with the doors, the ground floor first of the principal building, that door will be replaced with a storefront door. The surrounds on these doors include some pilasters and dental, like a hood molding over it. Those are all proposed to remain and be maintained on the property. The door upstairs will be a solid door, either smooth or paneled. The applicant can probably give you more details on that. So the storefront door, this has been, it was originally a residence. It has been commercial. It's proposed, and the applicant can talk about this, but as far as we can tell, it's proposed to continue as commercial. And the storefront door seems appropriate for that street front commercial entrance for that use. We believe the solid door upstairs is also appropriate, kind of makes it a little bit understated, almost like it could still be a residential area up there. So that seems to be acceptable. And then we have doors on the rest of the structure. This one single door is on the back on what's presumed to be the addition. And then you have a storefront door with a side light on the east side, and then a double door on the west side. Both of those are doors, solid doors, and then the single door would be replaced with a solid door as well. The windows are going to be vinyl 1/1. As you can see, pretty much, as far as I can tell, all of the windows on really all the property are metal, the awning crank style windows. And I can't remember what the site file form said about those when windows were put in, but you can see a lot of the windows on the property were bricked in. So there's some up there on that second floor that are metal, and then the ones on the front. Really, the two sides of that principal residence, all the windows are bricked in. And then on the cottage, you've again got the metal windows, the storefront doors, and those would all be replaced again with the solid doors and the 1/1 vinyl windows. One of these doors on this kind of east facing part of that front cottage facade will be replaced by a door. I think it's this one on the left. But Mr. Andriotis is here, can clarify that for you. And again, here's a couple more of the openings. I believe this one was a door. Oops, that one was a window. So some of these are completely gone and just boarded up. This is the back. Again, this is kind of interesting to me, this cottage being incorporated into the site wall. It's kind of a fun thing. There's rectangular windows in the back that are actually 1/1 now, will be replaced with the vinyl. And then over here on the west end, there's a window and a door, looks like a door opening. The applicant doesn't propose to replace the garage door at this time, but that shows you the view from back there. As far as the railing, you can kind of see on this drawing that what is proposed is to bring those vertical elements up. And I forget how many inches that has to be, but up high enough to meet today's building code and use that same kind of metal and then paint it to be all seamless. It should be really unnoticeable from the street as far as it being a new addition, and then should be pretty seamless from the porch views too. These are just two views looking, standing at the ground floor front door to the two sides of the porch. As far as I know, the applicant wishes to retain those elements of the building, the spiral staircase and those items. Nothing's proposed to be changed there. And this should add quite a bit of safety, especially for that second floor porch. So the project was publicly noticed and there were no responses received, and staff is recommending approval of the project as proposed. Are there any questions for staff?
Do we have the applicant?
Just a,
Yeah.
oh, I'm
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
A quick clarification on a storefront door. I've never heard that term before. I'm assuming a metal frame and mostly glass. Is that what a storefront door would be?
Yes, a metal frame, and I may have failed to put the applicant's storefront door in the slideshow, but hopefully it's in your packet. I don't know. But yeah, it's a frame. In this case, they're proposing aluminum for the frame and then a
Basically a
glass.
frame and mostly glass.
Mhm.
Okay.
And maybe there, you guys always remember I'm the staff person that administers this program, but I am not an architect or expert. So if there's another name for that, that would be great. I would love to know what it
Maybe
is.
there is. I just never heard that one before.
Yeah, and I'll look for that in the packet.
Okay, the applicant. Okay, if you want to go to the front, the podium there, that works out a lot better. Okay. Please state your name and,
George Andriotis, 930 Bayshore Drive.
okay. Okay, go ahead.
Well, we're proposing for the building and have a tentative agreement with a local restaurant to open up there. And in negotiations with that or the owners of the restaurant are proposing to rent it, we have come up with this plan on renovating the building and keeping architectural design aspects of the building while updating some of the things. We're not going to be changing window sizes. We're not going to be changing door trims, metal trims, really any of the architectural aspects of the building that give it what I believe, people would consider its character. But again, updating that building so that it's, appealing to the eye, safe for any commercial operator and safe for the patrons that, that attend there.
Is there any questions from the board?
Hi,
Hello.
great building.
Yes, a lot of excitement around it.
You've already answered one of my questions about using the existing openings for all the doors and the windows.
Mhm.
Okay, great. And in the application, it mentions paneled or smooth doors. Have you made a decision on that?
Yes, yes, sir. They will be paneled, which will match every door other than the rear door on that addition, which is glass inlaid or wood inlaid with glass. That'll be a panel door. Out back there is going to be a mop area and some access to the kitchen and bathrooms, and we kind of wanted a little more security than a glass door on the back.
Okay, good. And you answered another question already about all the trim. The original trim is staying and repaired if necessary. Okay, the only other comment I have, and this is one that's probably sticking the most, the railing.
Mhm.
Was that the only solution you could come up with, was to add that? Did you think about just raising the railing, the 4 or 5 inches that are necessary?
Yeah, removing, actually, in speaking to a welder coming up with that proposed plan, the railing is in such a state of disrepair, really, that if you go to remove it from the tap cons and or whatever, bolts that they use to secure it into the concrete, then it's very likely that you're going to ruin quite a bit of it.
Okay,
There is, say, 100% of the work, 75% of that work is going to be repairing that rusted railing. And he wasn't very confident that the integrity of the current railing would last taking it out, because he would have preferred removing it all and doing it, at his shop, but he just wasn't. Definitely the spiral staircase would not last moving it at all.
okay,
So he had proposed to raise, to follow the elements that go vertical and then continue those up. I think we have to go up 6 inches.
mhm,
And we could also match, the rolling pattern.
Hmm.
But being that it doesn't have to go up that far,
Mhm.
it would kind of be odd. You couldn't match the size of that swirl
Sure.
with just a 6-inch rise.
right,
So maybe something else that we'll propose here at a later date, but right now that's the best solution really for safety, integrity, and wanting to restore and keep the current railing.
okay, thanks.
Anybody else?
I do. I have a question.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for doing what you're doing. I enjoyed your work on the corner house as well in Orange.
Yeah.
So this is a French Creole architecture. The only recommendation I would make is just on the front facade only. Instead of doing 1/1, doing just like a 1 bar. If you Google any kind of architecture, and I worked in New Orleans for about 10 years.
Mhm.
Typical Creole would be a 2/2
Mhm.
like configuration. I think that it would add a lot to the architecture.
On the front side, we will
Yeah, and it
definitely
should be
consider
minimal
that.
on your budget too.
Yeah. We'll definitely consider that. I want to keep it, I think I called it when I turned it into Pat French something. So we're trying to keep that look
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Hence restoring the rails. I think those rails make a huge, difference with the building.
Yeah, just those old awning windows, obviously those didn't go when they put them in,
Yeah.
whenever the last thing was replaced. But I think a 2/2 light would be very appropriate for the building
I
and lend to the architecture.
appreciate your recommendation.
And if I could add to that, if that is something that you guys are looking to recommend to the applicant and he is willing to do so, you may wish, if you're going to approve the application, to put that into your motion, that to approve the application as submitted or for the 2/2 windows. The only reason being is that if it's not otherwise approved, then the applicant has to come back to get that approval for those types of windows.
Okay,
So-
would we, to go with a 2/2, would we have to have a vote for that?
Well, so the applicant can certainly, I mean, you are what, you can make a motion with conditions on it. One of those conditions can be, we approve the application is submitted, or with the 2/2 windows. So you can give him the option if he's willing to do so.
Okay,
But otherwise, if you don't give him the option and he decides he wants to do 2/2, because it was such a great recommendation, it really would keep with the French colonial architecture, then he's got to come back before this board.
okay, understood. Okay, any more questions?
I just think it's fabulous. They're even touching it. 'Cause, oh my heavens. It just, it's such a gorgeous building.
Yeah.
So glad you're doing it.
Mhm.
Yeah, really.
Appreciate it.
Do we have a
You want me
motion?
to make that motion?
Well, at this point, if the applicant is through with this presentation and there's no more questions, you would need to go to the public to see if there's any public comment on
Okay.
this application.
Okay, does the public have any, is it anybody in here want to add to this?
Anyone wishing to speak in favor or in opposition to the application?
Yep. Hearing none. Okay, do we have a motion?
Okay, I make a motion to accept application 2144 as presented, with the exception of the 2/2 windows on the front. Is that
Would be an option.
Would be
an option? With the option of the 2/2 windows in the front. Is that good?
That's good.
Okay.
Do I hear a second?
I will second it.
Okay, can we have a vote? Roll call vote?
Mr. Mrazinski,
Yes.
Ms. Ryan,
Yes.
Ms. Hallett,
Yes,
Mr. Sprecher.
Yes,
wonderful.
congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Do a good job.
Oh, we're going to try.
Okay, thank you so much for your,
Yes, yes, absolutely. I have one more application.
you have the next
Let-
one, I
let it
believe.
be present. There we go. Stay up here. I'll just
Yeah, just stand right there.
keep them here.
Okay,
This is a bigger project.
let me get my notes here. Okay, next application will be 2145. This is at 199 Grand Boulevard. Replacement of windows, doors. It's a contributing altered structure. Staff, if you could give us a brief on this?
Yes, and I'll share my screen again. So this one is located at 199 Green Boulevard. You can see that's where it is in the district. And again, this is for replacement of windows and doors on this property. The carriage house portion of the property is frame vernacular with concrete block foundational materials. And then there is a apartment building that was added in the 1970s. You can kind of see the configuration there. This carriage house, as it's kind of referred to, is the former garage apartment, whatever you want to call it, to I think it's 110 Spring Boulevard, but the principal residence there to the south. It's a separate property now. So this is one view of the property. The carriage house is the 2-story structure, and then the 1970s added apartments go around the corner there. This is another view of the property. And again, I kind of have some numbers there, but all of the windows and doors are being replaced. If I miscounted, it's everything. And then on the entire structure, and then the applicant this is another one of those TLC properties the applicant has, that they're doing some repair and replacement of some of the features on the property. This time we're looking at all solid panel doors. The material wasn't stated, but the applicant can talk about that. And then vinyl 1/1 single hung windows, and then the block portion of the addition would be stucco, smooth stucco. These are your review standards and some of the guidelines that would apply. This shows the doors. So we're looking at on the carriage house, one door in the front and one in the back. And some of the work was started, so you can see this pretty much what some of this will be looking like. There was no information on the previous doors. I took a picture of a door laying inside the carriage house through the window. It looks like one of those hollow core or wood veneer, so I'm sure it's not original. I'm guessing that's what was on it before. The windows are wood windows 1/1 being replaced with vinyl. The applicant has stated that the wood windows are beyond repair. I took just a couple pictures of the condition. Even the sills are pretty badly damaged. So those would be replaced with the vinyl. On the addition, again, the block surface will be overlain with the smooth stucco. I couldn't tell what the original materials on the addition were. I think maybe metal windows, but I wasn't sure. And just showing some of the items, the applicant has stated on the application that the shingling will be repainted. It looks like a fair amount of it may be in pretty good shape. They're repairing the porch roof, the string courses on that. One thing I wasn't sure about, just curious on it, is on the applicant will be resurfacing this asphalt driveway. You can see there was a little bit of a courtyard feature, and this porch really does tie the two structures together. So just curious whether any of that little bit of kind of a courtyard type feature would be retained as far as how this will end up looking from the street. But you can see some of those original supports when the porch was added are there. So it will really improve the look of this property from the street. So staff is recommending approval. This was properly publicly noticed and there were no responses received. Are there any questions?
I know. Okay, do we have any questions from the board?
Oh, to the staff or?
Yes, to the staff
No,
right
right.
now. Okay. We have the applicant representative here again. Can you give us a little brief on this?
Absolutely. It's 199 Green Boulevard, as Pat pointed out. It's an apartment structure that at one point had been changed to, I think, in the neighborhood of 10 apartments. Apartment might be a stretch, more like rooms with microwave and a little bathroom. We are proposing, and I know this is outside the scope, but it's going to be 5 apartments. And we will be replacing, again, the doors and windows. None of the sizes will be changed. The work had begun, and this is another interesting project here in Tarpon. We had numerous break-ins after purchasing. And rather than call weekly, I was told by TSPD to replace the first floor windows and doors. The original doors were compromised from the jambs to the door so much you couldn't secure it other than literally bolting from the back side. It was just so compromised. So we began on the first floor, and Pat showed some of the work that we began. But again, it was a combination of metal doors, wood doors, and fiberglass doors that we took out, none of which I would imagine date back to 1925. And we've replaced them all with fiberglass doors and then vinyl windows. The windows also, where it was 4 different kinds of windows that we were replacing out of there. None of the sizes changed. None of the trim changed. We are not proposing to change the block. So the flat block will remain flat stucco. And then Pat, you might be able to help me, that architectural block, I can't remember the name you use for it.
I called it reticulated block.
It's
Yeah.
rough block, I guess you would
Yeah.
use, which a lot of the buildings in the historic area have. We needed to repair approximately 20 of those blocks. Apparently a car had driven in to the building at one point. So I was lucky enough to find a stucco guy that has done that work before and had to repair that. He is going to be repairing those to make it all uniform. I think it's the carriage house that has that block on it, and it'll be contiguous from the south side into the east side, and then to the north side, which is the sides that have that. The repair to the roof actually feeds me. The roof had been repaired 6 or 7 years ago, so some of that wood that was replaced was done by whoever did the roof, but we are going to take care of the rest, hopefully. Any
Okay.
questions?
Staff had a question about the courtyard.
Mhm.
What is it? What do you plan to do with that?
The courtyard, we're actually going to expand that courtyard forward. So we're hoping in a later, I guess, application to put red historical street brick really from the front of the carriage house all the way to the back. Right now, there's approximately 18 to 20 feet in the rear. So the most, wow, what direction would that be? North side of the courtyard, but we're going to bring it all the way forward. This building also was where the tragedy with the local officer, happened.
Right.
And we have been in discussions with his widow, and we're going to build a fountain with a little area in memorial to him on the building. So that courtyard will incorporate the fountain and then some red brick around it and plants all the way around. That will not be accessible by vehicle at all. We're going to put parking barriers all the way across. I think the architectural drawings show 7 spots, 6 regular spots and 1 handicap. But it'll be an entire courtyard as opposed to, I think probably about 30% of it is courtyard now.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
One question.
Mhm.
Is it going to look like a carriage house?
I hope so.
Okay.
We are going to save the shake. As Pat had pointed out, the shake siding is in miraculously good condition. I can't believe it. I've been peeling the paint off here and there,
Mm.
and it's in pretty good condition. That the carriage house has a metal roof as opposed to the shingle that's in the back. It kind of separates it, and hopefully we can keep that look. That apartment down there that incorporates the stalls and everything is going to be kind of neat. We have a
Good.
decent idea to do that.
Okay. Another wonderful project. Wow. Hmm.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on this?
Actually, I had a
Oh.
question too.
I'm sorry.
I may have missed it and you might have already said it, but the dental work, that's all being saved. And if it needs to be repaired, you'll repair it. The little box, the little squares.
I built every one of them. They were all rotten.
You
Those
did
are all
already,
Those are all
okay.
brand new.
Okay.
Brand new, 3 months old.
Okay. I was wondering why they looked so good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Do we have any public comment on this? This one? Okay, any discussions with the board? No? Do I hear a motion?
Do you want to? Go ahead.
Yeah, if I could get
Uh,
the number fast enough.
What's that?
Are you making it?
Oh.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
It doesn't matter to me. I will make a motion that application 2145 for 199 Grand Boulevard be approved along with the staff's recommendations.
I second.
Okay, we have a roll call vote?
Mr. Merzinski,
Yes.
Ms. Ryan,
Yes.
Ms. Hallett,
Yes.
Mr. Sprecher.
Yes. Okay,
Mhm.
congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
That's
y'all.
great.
Have a Great evening. Thank you for listening.
Have a lot of fun.
It looks very, this guy is going to be really nice.
Have a great evening. I will make everybody happy.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow.
Okay. Next is application 2146. This is for 218 East Tarpon Avenue. This is to replace a sign for non-contributing property. Staff, do we have a briefing on this?
Yes,
Okay.
I'll share my screen again. This is for placement of a sign at 218 East Tarpon Ave. That's the location of the property there. And again, location in the historic district. This is a masonry vernacular non-contributing property. It seems like from the site file form, the main issue was the pretty drastic alteration of the entrance in the storefront, original to the store that kind of made it non-contributing. The applicant is asking to place a plexiglass sign on the smooth surface of the front facade. And the sign meets the district size requirements. And it includes a simple white border and is either nailed or tacked to the building. The applicant, I'm not sure if they're present, but they may wish to address that. And again, the storefront was altered in the 1980s, but the upper portion still retains a little bit of the original detail. And this is the sign. The sign is up at this time. The applicant is asking for the approval. This is the property here between the Lindiakis here and these stores over here. So this is the piece of property, the yellow building. Just kind of a front and closer views so you can see what the sign looks like. And that's a close-up of the sign. So these are your review criteria that most apply. And we do have a guideline 86 regarding signs. And it's, it pretty much complies with the guidelines being on the smooth surface of the building. I would say if there's anything about the sign that you would want to address, I would just suggest that you might want to have them paint the nails or put some kind of frame around it, but that's up to you. If you're okay with the look of it, then, you can go ahead and approve it. But that was the only thing I noticed that you might want to address. This was publicly noticed. There were no responses received, and staff is recommending approval. Are there any questions?
Well, and if I could make a comment, when you're talking about Pat mentioned the look of the sign, that would be the aesthetic look of the border and the nails only, but the actual logo, and we've had this discussion before, the actual logo and art on the sign is not underneath your purview, and that's something that you don't have any control over.
Interesting.
Part of their First Amendment right.
Okay. Okay, do we have the applicant here? No. Okay, or a representative for the applicant.
No?
Okay. Board, you want to discuss it?
How could we vote on something if we can't ask questions?
Right.
Well, that one I don't know.
Well, so the packet that you have is considered evidence that's germane to the application. Some of this information are things that the applicant would have submitted. You can consider that if you find that that meets the criteria to grant the application, then you can grant the application. If you find that what's been submitted does not meet the criteria, then you could deny the application. The applicant doesn't always have to give a presentation. They're afforded the ability to do so, but they don't necessarily have to if they feel like they've submitted enough. So your decision would be based on the application as presented, and then any questions that you might have of staff, but mostly just the application that's been presented.
So if we feel not enough information has been submitted, is that enough to not vote on this?
No, you have to vote on it either way. The application is before you, but and it's not, I guess I wouldn't say. If the packet gives you sufficient information that you find that your criteria are covered, then you would have to find in favor. If you find that the application materials that have been submitted do not include, are not considered competent substantial evidence that would allow you to meet the criteria, then you would have to deny it. So the reason I qualify it like that is twofold. One, that's the legal standard. And two, sometimes we wish we had more, though more is not required. So whether or not your guideline, or excuse me, whether or not your criteria is met or not may be a lesser standard than what you wish you had to review in the packet to approve the project, as it were. I know that sounds more confusing than it is helpful.
Yeah, so what we could do right now is discuss it amongst ourselves, whether we're,
Okay.
Well, I would also caution, you may not have an applicant for a presentation, but you do still need to ask if there's any public comment and go
Oh,
through
yeah.
the same procedure as it still is a quasi judicial hearing.
okay. So the next step would be for public opinion, public input. Okay, is there anybody who would like to publicly add to this? Hearing none, okay. Is discussion amongst the board?
Yes.
Okay, let's shoot.
I drove up and down Tarpon Avenue looking at all the signage. And this sign, it's in an area that has 3 adjoining stores. And their signage is on their windows, not on the building, but they do have awnings. And this building does not have an awning, but they do have their signage in the window. And I don't know why it's necessary to put that signage above the, I know its criteria is correct, but I just
Well,
don't like it, but
Okay,
that's
so
not our job.
I was
right?
going to say, just for legal clarification.
Yeah,
Whether or not you like the sign or not, this was
Right.
like, we had this distillery that came with the logo that was not palatable to all. Whether or not you like the sign or not is not
I know the criteria. is
right. And
there.
so, and for signs, it's a little bit different because there's constitutional issues. So for signs, really, especially this sign, the only things that you really to consider are the size of the sign, whether it meets the historic guidelines for the size of the sign. And as Pat mentioned, do you aesthetically, do you want the nails covered? Would you prefer a frame to be around it? And even then,
even then you're kind of pushing it.
yeah. I mean, the issue really becomes there was a Supreme Court decision a couple of years ago that basically said signs are speech, and,
Mhm.
you're very limited in what you can dictate.
Do we know what size this is? Is it exactly what's on the building now?
This is what's on the
That's
building
it.
right now.
Oh,
It's
that's
up
the
there.
sign?
That's the sign.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
it
a
looks
little
like
tiny-
vinyl, so I didn't, that's
Yeah.
plexiglass?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly doesn't look like.
Drive up and down.
That's what
Tarpon
they're
Avenue.
saying, that it's plexiglass.
Huh, I didn't know.
Okay.
So the sign was already hung without the approval of this board.
That's correct. There's a code enforcement case on it.
Okay. Yeah, but it's legal. Okay.
This does not look
Mm-mm.
like, it's hard to tell. It really looks like a decal of some sort.
No,
And it
they
it
have
looks
a,
like it's got tape on the edges, on the ends.
right
Yeah,
here,
it's
what
bent.
they're talking about on this one right here. The nails.
I know, but look, that's tape. This is not,
yeah.
this is not acrylic.
Well,
And
it's-
and
it's tape.
plexiglass would not hold up to the sun in the UV. It'll turn yellow. So I don't know, maybe there's a decal over the plexiglass?
Let's go. Get this page. And
Yeah, I
then-
know, I saw,
Yeah,
One, two,
you can-
yeah.
You can blow it up. That works. That is tape, isn't it?
It's definitely tape.
Well, and the application, unfortunately, the applicant's not here to answer your questions, but the application is asking to install a plexiglass sign. So whatever you're voting here on tonight, you're voting on this application. If you vote to approve the installation of a plexiglass sign, then that is what the applicant is required to do. If
Okay.
the sign that's presently out there is not plexiglass, then it's still not approved with the certificate of approval because it's not as requested.
I think if I have to vote on it, I would vote no because I don't know
No,
enough
that's
about
the
what it is.
That's a big loophole. It's not plexiglass.
Yeah.
They have like a decal on top of the plexiglass, but all I can see, it is clearly tape on the edges. To me, if I'm gonna vote,
Okay.
I'm gonna vote no.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, let's have a,
Not me.
let's have a motion to approve or disapprove.
Well, I can do it. Hang on, I could find them.
Okay.
I can get back to that page. I don't think so. Okay, I motion to not approve application 21-46.
Do I hear the second?
I will second that.
Okay, can you give us
Excuse me,
a,
1 minute. You said not approved.
that's
right?
correct. But
Okay.
this is a motion for disapproval.
Okay.
Okay.
Can-
Okay, can we have a roll call vote?
Mr. Mrazinski,
So yes on the
Vote
motion if
yes
you
will
want
be
to,
that I don't want. the
Correct.
sign. Yes.
Ms. Ryan,
Yes.
Ms. Hallett,
Yes.
Mr. Sprecher,
Yes. You have to go with it. Okay. Okay, the motion's been approved to disapprove. Okay, and
Can I just get some other clarification? Since this did not pass, does the applicant have to remove what they have on the store right
that
now?
has to do with the code enforcement case and that goes through the code enforcement board and what they're required to do.
Oh,
Okay.
So
okay.
that's outside the purview of this board, but they do have the ability to appeal it if they wish to the Board of Commissioners.
Great.
Oh, yeah.
I knew that. Okay.
okay, next on the agenda is a presentation.
Yes.
Okay, did you want to go forward with that?
Yes, and I would like to ask Mark to bring up the PowerPoint that's on the laptop up front. We have Dr. Tina Bucavalis with us this evening, and she is the Director of Florida Cultural Resources Incorporated. And she previously served as State Folklorist and Director of the Florida Folklife Program under the Florida Bureau of Historic Preservation, also as Curator of Folklife under the Historical Museum of Southern Florida, and curator of arts and historical resources here with the city of Tarpon Springs. And she conducted research on public folklore as a Fulbright scholar, in Greece, and is the author, co-author, or editor of the following publications: Greek Music in America, Greeks in Tarpon Springs, the Florida Folklife Reader, Just Above the Water, Florida Folk Art, and South Florida Folklife. She also is involved in historic preservation, has curated numerous exhibits, and published many essays. So Dr. Bucavalis holds a PhD in folklore from Indiana University. So I'd like to welcome her. And yeah, you'll be going up to this podium and
For this presentation, is it possible not to wear the mask so we can hear you?
Yeah, you'll never hear me with the mask on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Is this working, Mark?
It's not working. On the left-hand side, is the switch turned on?
Turned it on. Yes.
There we
if you
go.
Go down.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Okay, I'm going to turn this way so I too can see the screen. I'm here today as a representative of the Greektown Preservation and Heritage Association, a nonprofit whose mission is to preserve and promote the cultural and historical heritage of the Greektown Historic District. We hope to accomplish this by envisioning renovations, upgrades, and policies consistent with historic preservation practices and the best interests of the district. The association will then make recommendations to the city, Pinellas County, developers, and other interested parties to ensure that our heritage and history are given due consideration in proposed planning and implementation. And before I go on, I would also like to introduce Nicolette Henderson, our co-secretary, who is a former alternate with this board. Well, she says that it's totally changed since she's been here. And also someone who, when we were doing the nomination for the Greektown district, was one of the key people in our local focus group because she grew up there and her family has owned property. And basically she knew the owners or residents of every house in the district. It was impressive. Anyway, in June 2014, the Tarpon Springs Greektown Historic District was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, which I will refer to as the NR. The Florida Bureau of Historic Preservation considers it the state's first traditional cultural property listing, and a perusal of listed TCP, traditional cultural property sites, verifies that it's the nation's first non-Indigenous TCP district. I will also briefly touch on Cicada Cemetery, an auxiliary site, which was added to the NR in March 2019 as a TCP for its association with the Greek community. So why are these places important? Since the 1970s, many historic preservationists have shifted from the dominant 20th century focus on architectural style to a more humanistic and social value-based determination of the significance of historic resources. They recognize that it is not architectural style, but people in their relationship with nature and culture who create places and determine significance. This approach often seeks to have communities determine which resources are significant to them and to tell a more complete history that includes ethnographic documentation of context and use. And it led to a call from the NR for more non-Indigenous TCP listings. So what is a TCP? Now let's see. Oops. Okay, the National Historic Preservation Act of 1980 failed to provide coverage for the full range of cultural resources. Intangible cultural elements were outside the scope of the law. The 1980 amendments to this act included a directive to study the means of preserving and conserving the intangible elements of our cultural heritage, such as arts, skills, folk life, and folkways, and to recommend ways to preserve, conserve, and encourage the continuation of the diverse traditional, that is prehistoric, historic, ethnic, and folk cultural traditions that underlie and are a living expression of our American heritage. In response, Ormond Loomis, who was then the director of Florida Folklife Program, prepared Cultural Conservation, the Protection of Cultural Heritage in the United States, presented to Congress in 1983 by the National Park Service and Library of Congress. The report recommended that traditional cultural resources, both those associated with historic properties and those without specific property reference, be more systematically addressed. In 1990, the National Park Service issued the National Register Bulletin 38, which defined a traditional cultural property as eligible for inclusion in the NR because of its association with cultural practices or beliefs of a living community that are rooted in the community's history and important in maintaining the continued cultural identity of the community. It should be noted that TCPs are not a separate and distinct type of property, but an overlay of traditional cultural significance that may be associated with a property otherwise listed in or eligible for listing in the NR. And I'm going to show you later some examples in Greektown, all of which are associated with particular properties. And that can be a building, structure, district, object, or site. In addition, TCPs must maintain continuity of cultural association or use into the present, though it is acknowledged that traditional cultural significance and use may evolve and change over time. And this is very important. They're not stuck in one historic period. They continue into the present and change over time. In practice, the majority of TCP listings have been Native American and Hawaiian sacred sites. But Bulletin 38 emphasizes Native properties, but it also states that this should not be meant to imply that only Native Americans ascribe traditional cultural value to historic properties, or that such ascription is common only to ethnic minority groups in general. Americans of every ethnic origin have properties to which they ascribe traditional cultural value, and if such properties meet the NR criteria, they can and should be nominated for inclusion. In 2012, the National Park Service issued a call to modernize historic preservation methods and technologies. This included a review of Bulletin 38 so that it could more effectively identify, evaluate, and interpret resources of various cultures. There was also a push for more TCP nominations, and it was out of this push that these Tarpon Springs listings originated. Although protection of NR eligible and listed sites is limited, the Act mandated some safeguards. In the case of an eligible or listed resource, a Section 106 review must be undertaken before implementing a federally assisted, or federally licensed project. So, quote, the NR lists and Section 106 requires review of effects on tangible cultural resources, that is, historic properties. However, the attributes that give such properties significance, such as their association with historical events, are often intangible in nature. Such attributes cannot be ignored in evaluating and managing historic properties. Properties and their intangible attributes of significance must be considered together. So that's what the feds have to say about it. And this is what the state says about it. Listing of TCPs on the NR fulfills goals for the state of Florida, as stated in their Vision for Historic Preservation, which is detailed in Florida's Comprehensive Historic Preservation Plan. And that includes Objective 1A of Goal 1, which is identification and evaluation of historic resources, to conduct surveys at the municipal level to identify historic properties, encourage the incorporation of modern technologies and techniques in historic resource survey, including oral histories, expand the scope of historic resource survey beyond architecture to identify rural and urban landscapes, traditional cultural properties, and other underrepresented resources. And there's another objective, which is to identify and designate TCPs in Florida and list them on the National Register. The state's plan gives the Greektown listing as its only example of a non-native TCP. And when the nomination of the NR nomination of Greektown was reviewed at the Bureau of Historic Preservation, many, if not most of the staff members attended because they wanted to learn more about TCPs, and this was Florida's first step. So I'm going to give you some context on the Greektown district. First of all, this is a map. And you can see that it stretches from the Anclote River, the Sponge Docks, all the way down to Tarpon Avenue, essentially. And that's Grand Avenue and up to Pinellas and a little bit above that. So you probably know much of this, but probably not all of it. In the early 20th century, Greek immigrants, primarily from the Dodecanese Islands, significantly expanded and changed Florida's sponge industry. In 1905, 500 men arrived in a town that only had 541 people. Within a couple years, there were 100 sponge boats and up to 800 Greeks who were working Florida waters, as well as many others that were in related maritime businesses. Using both deep sea diving and hooking techniques on boats with sails and engines, the Greeks revolutionized the sponge business, and Tarpon Springs became the largest U.S. sponge port. Throughout the 20th century, Greeks continued to settle in Tarpon Springs, changing it forever. At first, Greek men arrived alone, living on boats, in boarding houses, or divers' cottages near the sponge docks. This is one of the few that still remain. As their families arrived, they moved into houses south of the docks, gradually creating Greektown with residences, stores, churches, restaurants, coffee houses, and recreational facilities that stretched to the city centers. To the city center. Signs at the railroad station were posted in English and Greek. And this is actually a sponge warehouse, one that still remains and which very fittingly has become the office of a bridge painting company. Since Greeks came to Tarpon Springs in relatively large numbers, they maintained an unusually large portion of their culture. As folklorist Robert Georges wrote, the Florida climate was comparable to their home islands. Because of their numbers, they could continue to speak Greek, practice the Greek Orthodox religion, maintain their family structure, and perpetuate familiar dietary habits and modes of dress. The men engaged in the same occupation they had in Greece and used the same technology in their work. Theirs was virtually a life transplanted. Several scholars estimated our Greek population in the early 20th century based on the census and other records. Anthropologist Russell Bernard believed there were 800 Greeks by 1907, mostly male. Louis Adamick, who included a chapter on them in his 1940 book From Many Lands, believed Greeks number over 2,500, more than 50% of the total population at that point. In 1967, Edwin Buxbaum asserted that Greeks were the majority in many of the years from 1905 to 1940, a situation which has had no other equal in any other community in the United States. And he also said, because of their aggressiveness in industry, they were soon to become the dominant group in the city and remain so for years. Another historian, Charles Moskos, wrote, with the thriving sponge industry as its basis, Tarpon Springs became more than a Greektown enclave. It became a Greek town, in fact. From 1905 to World War II, Tarpon Springs had a majority Greek population. Their accounts are especially interesting because they contrast with those of local non-Greek authors who stress the history of the Anglo-Americans. And of course, very little attention was paid to the African-Americans who were here since the beginning. Despite their numbers and extensive infrastructure, in the early days, Greeks often remained socially separate from Anglo-Americans, probably due to cultural differences, but certainly also to ongoing discrimination. After World War II, though they maintained their culture, they participated more fully in American life, moved out of Greektown, and were more fully accepted. With the decline of the sponge industry in the late 40s, many sought employment outside Tarpon Springs. By the late 70s, an estimated 1/3 of the residents of Tarpon were of Greek heritage in a town of 13,000. Although many Greeks had moved north to work in the steel mills, there was also a new stream of Greek American retirees from the north and new arrivals coming from Greece. Sponge fishing continued on a limited basis, but in 1986, there was a major revival supporting about 40 working boats. By 1996, it leveled out to 8 or 10 boats working regularly and a handful of others periodically. Currently, the percentage of residents with Greek heritage is estimated at about 15% due to outmigration for jobs or larger homes, education, and also a large influx of new residents. So today, Tarpon Springs is the epicenter of about a 40-mile corridor that boasts such a large Greek population that Greece established a consulate in Tampa, which is something usually reserved for much larger cities like Los Angeles or New York or Chicago. They estimate that the area's Greek population is almost twice as much as it says in the census, because not everyone identifies themselves as Greek. Many larger cities have larger Greek populations, but no other city has a larger percentage of residents of Greek background as Tarpon Springs. Now, the Greek Town Historic District measures 140 acres with 296 contributing buildings, sites, and structures, including about a dozen sponge boats, and preserves a strong ethnic and maritime character. It is significant for its tenacious continuity of traditional culture, extensive Greek infrastructure, and is the only Greek American community based on the sponge industry. Greek identity is expressed and reinforced through the built environment, boats, occupations, music and dance, social organizations, rites of passage, beliefs, family values, occupations, sacred and secular events, and religious practices. Residents maintain many aspects of Greek or Greek American culture in their daily lives, at home, work, or in religious environments. Greek is not only widely spoken, but is the primary language in many homes. In other words, it's the epitome of a Greek TCP. So I'll just sort of flip through some of these. As you can see, these are mostly examples of intangible cultural heritage, but are tied to specific places in which they happen in the Greek Town District. You can, although this was taken in 1947, this place looks pretty much the same, and it certainly serves the same purpose. These are one current, many past pictures of the coffee houses. These people are making kavurma, which is a traditional dish that used to be taken out on the sponge boats, now made by people in the Greek community for special occasions. This is at the blessing of the boats on January 5th, the day before Epiphany. The man to the left is now an archbishop. He's a local boy, but at that time he was a metropolitan. Oh, and by the way, this is the last working Greek-style sponge boat left in Tarpon. Procession. This is my late neighbor showing children how to make lazarakia, which they do just the weekend before Easter. So this just something like this just happened about a week ago. Holy Thursday. And this is what happened last Friday, and cooking lamb in the backyard. This is a scene from a wedding at the cathedral. This is the Greek Independence Day parade. This is the same boat. It was built by George Sarukos, who was the last Greek boat builder and part of a line of boat builders, traditional boat builders from Kalymnos, who built boats with no plans other than the ones they drew themselves. He only stopped working a few years ago, and he had a major accident. And this is why our working waterfront is not a promenade, but a working waterfront. The guys actually use it to sort sponges. The sponge merchants come to view the sponges. It's an important part of the sponge industry. This is the last helmet maker, craftsman. Some are made in factories, but they're not really of exactly the same kind, more modern design. But Nicholas Toth is the last helmet maker anywhere in the world. There's George Sarukos. Oops. By the way, the Night in the Islands that we used to have were actually very successful if you ever got to any of them, because they are the closest thing in this country, from what I can determine, to a traditional Greek panegyri, which is kind of like a village celebration, often for saints' days, but where people have tables in the plaza, the traditional plaza. And this was, the sponge exchange in the old days was the sort of plaza for the Greek community where Glendies and other celebrations were held. All right. Just briefly about Cicada, because even though it was separately listed, it's actually part of the cultural complex. So it was added to the NR in 2019 as a TCP for its association with the Greek community, sponge industry, Greek music, and as a site where community members maintain Greek burial practices and religious rituals. Greeks and Greek Americans represent a large component of existing burials, and I was told they are the majority of incoming burials. Discernible patterns in funerary art and burial rituals constitute an important example of funerary culture that Tarpon Springs shares with Greece and especially the Dodecanese Islands. Moreover, many markers reflect a synthesis of evolving American styles with Greek cultural elements and decorative details, and some aspects, such as sponge industry imagery, do not occur elsewhere in the U.S. Overall, it does contribute to the sense of place, historical development, and culture of the Greek community. And actually, all of these musicians were nationally and internationally known. They had quite a reputation. A lot of people have sort of come to retire in Tarpon Springs. So I want to share some concerns that our organization has with you. With city approval of the Greektown Historic District, listed in 2014. After 7 years, we feel that it should be recognized in matters related to historic preservation and should appear on the city website and in its special area and comprehensive plans. And probably it should have been mentioned in your recently revised manual. Although it doesn't have to adhere to the regulations, since it is about historic preservation and historic districts in Tarpon, we feel that it does have a place. As a TCP, which is defined as evolving and not fixed in one era, the Greektown Historic District, as I said, is not governed by municipal historic preservation codes and not part of the local, as not, I believe, a local district. Perhaps the city's lack of formal recognition may be because it does not currently have an established infrastructure to recognize this kind of district. This was, the infrastructure was created when the first historic district came into being, to guide the regulations along with that. But whatever the reason, we feel it's time for the city to develop strategies to incorporate recognition of the Greektown Historic District into all aspects of government. And this would also encourage the creation and use of appropriate guidelines, not codes, but guidelines for district renovations, building, and development. Our organization considers proper recognition to be an urgent issue at this time. This is in part because the city plans and policies that have not recognized our district have threatened its integrity in the not too distant past. I don't know if all of you were here, but during the Sponge Docks fiasco in 2014, municipal paradigms had oriented development towards tourism and commercial interests rather than community interests in a broader sense. Thus, those promulgating the plans were possibly ignorant of Greek community interests, and their plans privileged artificial displays of culture over the organic practice of culture. But the people who shape communities from the ground up are really the ones who should have agency. Hopefully, we will be able to address such problems in the future by encouraging place-rooted development that preserves not only building facades, but also their authentic cultural context, including the often ignored cultures of the poor, such as sponge fishermen, or those of varied races and ethnic groups. But what is most crucial in this process is working with the community to achieve their aspirations. So we do see problems looming again. For instance, rather than an unnecessary and expensive gateway arch, we would prefer that the city undertake a major project to assist owners in renovating buildings on Green Boulevard to be more consistent with their historical appearance. A preservation architect could be hired to consult on project stages and general design, including strategies to deal with rising sea levels in the Anclote River. Plans to mitigate the flooding and damaging of the historic buildings at the docks, most of which are listed on the National Register, are essential to prevent destruction within the next several decades. And propose general policies and the special area code allowing missing middle housing would flood our residential district with enough development to endanger its integrity. We look to you and your concern with historic preservation as a natural ally in fulfilling our mission and protecting our heritage. So thank you very much. And do you have any questions? And are we allowed questions as a semi-judicial hearing?
Yes. Well, this is no longer quasi-judicial. It's just a
Yeah.
presentation. So
Okay.
yes, of course.
Presentation, yeah.
Okay,
What a great presentation.
It was.
thank you.
Tell me again what TCP stands for. I want to write it.
Traditional cultural property.
Thank you.
Okay.
Of course, you can look at that again, on YouTube.
Yeah.
Or another thing, if you're interested, if you Google Greektown and National Register, it will take you, they feature the Greektown Historic District on their website, and it gives you a link to the nomination, which explains in much, much greater detail about all of the buildings, traditional architecture, how TCPs relate to this district, and so on.
Great.
I have a question. Oh,
Yes.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
On that lovely little cottage,
Yes,
are you protecting it?
there's no protection.
There is no
Except when there's
protection.
federal money involved. I don't know. Nicolette, do you know what's happening with that cottage? I heard some of that property might be for sale. Okay.
Yeah, because that's the thing, is all these beautiful little, we just lost the sponge barn
Yes,
on
I
Orange Street.
I know.
Which was heartbreaking.
it is heartbreaking.
Mhm. So these buildings just need protection and.
As do the sponge boats. When I was doing this, there were several sponge boats that had been listed individually on the National Register in 1990. When I went to see what happened to them, they were mostly gone. They're just gone. There are only 3 remaining. The one you saw, the working sponge boat, the one that the city keeps and repairs, at the docks, and the one inside the sponge exchange, which I fear is rotting from the inside out. They put a covering over the outside rotting, but I don't think they really are addressing interior rot. That's it. They're done. And there were over 200 sponge boats built here, during the first half of the 20th century.
Sad.
Yeah.
Are you asking us for anything?
No, I'm just, I'm sorry. I just wanted you to be aware that we exist, that we may ask you for something eventually, or may look to you to be our allies in some way, shape, or form when things come to the fore. I suspect we will be approaching the commission at various times, and we do hope to have a lot to say about the special area plan and how it, and in the comprehensive plan about the historic elements section, which very much needs updating. So that's it.
A suggestion, like the little cottage, because I love the little, anyway, maybe ask the city to buy it since they're so, and maintain it through the city.
Well, that's an idea. I don't know how that would work, but
Buying up all kinds of property that they think that, I don't know.
that's a good point. Yeah, we'll think about that.
Where you go for the commission. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 All right. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it.
Great. Good.
Okay. Oh. Got all kinds of questions on that. Okay, let's see where we're at. Staff, do you have any comments?
Yes, just want to follow that up a little bit. I'll make this PowerPoint available to you all. If Tina's going to be coming before the Board of Commissioners, I'll certainly keep you informed on that. I will be kind of briefing you, I think next month, on the latest grant that we've gotten from the state to do an adaptation and resilience plan for the historic district and the Greektown district. I haven't, we're waiting for the governor to sign the budget. Once he signs the budget, then it'll be official. So I'll either update you in June or July on that. In the meantime, the Board of Commissioners at their last meeting approved for the Planning and Zoning Department to go ahead and put out a request for proposals for update of the comprehensive plan, which is going to be a pretty big job over the next couple of years, 18 to 24 months. And we do have a historic element, but you'll be hearing more about the comprehensive plan as well. So.
Okay, Board, you have any comments?
Yeah, I actually have a couple of things for some clarification. You sent out those emails. We got a couple of them about those proposed changes to the demolition of
Yes.
properties.
Yes.
What are the implications of that?
Okay, so that was, I believe it was House Bill 401, and Erica may know more about it. It came up last session, didn't pass. This session, it looks like they engrossed a bill. And this was to address architectural standards on single family. So the bill as originally filed in the last year basically didn't want communities to regulate architectural design on single family unless it was in a historic district. That was one of the exceptions. So that was okay. Somebody, the last minute stuff was in case you all were interested in contacting your senators. Somebody tacked on Thursday night, that anybody could demolish any single family anywhere. Yeah, well, it doesn't look like the Senate picked that up. So I think they passed the bill without it. If I just checked it this afternoon, but
That's my understanding.
yeah, so that was just in case you guys wanted to contact senators.
Okay. I did have another maybe question here. Does anyone from the staff ever make any design suggestions to applicants or give them guidance other than just handing them maybe our ordinances or something?
Yes, we do probably on a larger scale. We do kind of give them a collective reaction, and that's myself and the other staff members. I always ask their opinion because I always need as much input as I can get on this stuff. as to whether we think it meets the guidelines for sure, and whether we think it's gonna fly, gonna be consistent with the neighborhood and the property. We do. When it gets down to details and materials, it's, we haven't really gotten into a whole lot of back and forth with the applicants on the real detailed stuff. But
Okay, and then this may be a question for you. I touched on it a little bit tonight, but I didn't go very far with it. That railing business was really bothering me.
okay.
Can we as a board make design suggestions?
Okay, so this is where there's a little bit of a sticky wicket. Your job is, okay, so when you make design suggestions, do you mean to the individual applicant or
Yes.
to
Well, let's
staff
use
as a
that
whole?
as an
Okay.
example, the railings. I
So
thought that was a terrible solution. In
has
my
this,
head, I came up with 2 or 3 others that I thought were way better.
okay, so no, it is not your job to do that. That's the simple question, or that's the simple answer.
Maybe not our job, but can we?
I'm gonna stick with my answer. No, it is not. So the reason I say that is because this is, it's a quasi judicial proceeding, which means that you're sitting and you are acting in a judicial manner. Judges do not typically give counsel advice on how they should move forward with their case. Now, all that to say, has this board done that before? The 2/1 or the 2/2 would look better than the 2/1.
Mhm.
Yeah, of course. But the applicant, one, doesn't have to take that. And two, again, it's not your job, because what ends up happening is that you're sitting as a board, you're trying to find a solution to a problem that may not exist. So I would caution doing that, making a suggestion. Also, you're making one suggestion to one applicant. Maybe your other board members don't necessarily feel that way.
Mhm.
And then, I thought the back and forth was a very good, a good example of a way that you can kind of get to that, to say, hey, have you thought about that? Where you let him give you the information and then he can tell you why they got to that point. Because often the applicant is going to know more about the actual construction efforts and whatnot, as you heard today. So can you say, I think that in a French colonial, this would be more aesthetically pleasing. Have you considered this, this, and this? You can. I would just caution yourself to doing that, because now I would just caution you from doing that. I mean,
But is
I
the-
like that you're trying to help them and say, I think this would be better. As a historic preservation board, we are of a nature to tell you what is aesthetically pleasing based on the historical perspective. That's not exactly what the role of this board is.
I'm not sure I understand that piece either, because if we're here to advise on architectural and historic preservation, the architectural significance of it, whoever approved the windows on that building didn't do it any justice. It was a French building. It's a New Orleans style. If you Google it, that's what comes up is that style of window. I feel like we should be making sure that we are in keeping with the architectural styles.
Right. But you are a quasi judicial board, so you're bound to the criteria, which are always listed in the application packet. So those are really the only things you're supposed to be considering. What this board has a unique position is because you also have historic guidelines. And as I've told this board before, they are just that, they're guidelines. You cannot necessarily require the applicant to do, like, you say, I'm going to make a motion, but we're conditioning on it that you have to only do 2/2.
Yeah, no,
Can
I
you
get
do that?
that.
Sure, of course you can do that, but what will get overturned? Likely.
Well, almost anything we do in here can get overturned.
Yeah, that is also an interesting portion of the city's code, that this is a quasi judicial board, but if any applicant makes that appeal to the Board of Commissioners, they are not bound by anything that you are bound by.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is a legislative function of the Board of Commissioners that was made at the time that code was put in place. Perhaps it will change in the future, perhaps it will not. The other thing about this board that you guys do have the ability to do is take a look at things around, and I think the presentation tonight was very helpful in that you do have the ability to recommend specific properties or areas that you think that are of historic significance and make those recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. So, that's another aspect of something this board can do. So to answer your question, no, it's not your job, but also, I mean, it's happened before. And again, applicants might like it, but at the end of the day, if they double it down and say no. Mm-mm.
So expanding on that a little bit. If we vote no, if I vote no, I'm just speaking for myself. Again, I'm using the railing. I'm really bugged about that railing. Sorry. If I voted no, and it was specifically because I did not like the railing, is that something I could do? I mean.
If you do,
using that-
don't say that on the record.
I wouldn't say that.
So I make a joke, but honestly, if you vote no because you don't like the way that it looks, but it otherwise meets the criteria, then no, you are not supposed to do that. By law, if it meets the criteria that is in your code, you are required, whether you like it or not, or like the way they did it or not, you are required to vote yes.
I'm going on record, I don't like it.
You can go on record. That's not going to come before you probably. But again, whether or not that's the thing is sitting as board members, you're individuals, you all have your personal preferences. That doesn't make a difference. When you're sitting on the board, those personal preferences go out the door. Your expertise does come into play. And again, you can make suggestions, but the applicant doesn't have to take them. And I'll let you know if I think the suggestions go too far or whatnot. But the other thing is, fortunately or unfortunately, your role is in a quasi-judicial manner. You have very little say. Your say is, does it meet the criteria that's in the code? And does it fit within the historic guidelines? Those two things need to come into play. If it's part of your guidelines and it meets the criteria, you are required, whether or not you like the project, whether or not you like the railings or the paint color or whatever, or the style of window or whatnot, you are required to vote yes if it meets all those criteria.
And could I ask for a clarification? I would just encourage the board to, you've got 11 criteria. And
Which are not always applicable, right?
they're not
They're-
always all applicable. But so I give a staff report and a staff recommendation. But if you read those criteria, and some of them they get pretty specific. Correct me if I'm wrong, counsel. But if you do not agree with staff that one of those criteria are met, like architectural details, including color, materials, texture, it gets pretty specific. And you say, well, you can say, I don't like it, but rather than I don't like it, you might say, I don't feel this meets criteria, whatever, because I don't think it's in, keeping with the architecture or something. That is something they can do, right? In other words, I don't agree with staff. You are the board. Staff is going to give you their opinion. And I think what they're getting at too is that's one reason we want people on the board with architectural backgrounds to judge what the applicant's presenting, but also you would make a finding. You've got something here that says windows should be consistent with the building's original architecture. If you feel that
It also
it
says
doesn't quite
should
meet
be.
that,
It doesn't
and you
say it
have-
has to be.
yeah, there's a judgment call to make on that criterion. And so I've made a judgment call and presented it, and then you are the deciding body and you would make your call and make a finding. That's kind of the way I see it. But you've got some pretty good detailed criteria to use.
And that's
Is that
that's exactly right.
correct?
And Pat's heard me say this to other boards before, that just because staff makes a recommendation, that doesn't mean you have to rubber stamp it. Staff makes a recommendation based on the information that they have. You also have the benefit of having the applicant here, and you can question the applicant. If you feel that staff has erred, and that again, the architectural, the window stylings don't match, and absolutely not, that does not solidify, that does not meet that criteria, then you can vote no on that, even if staff recommends that it get approved. I would challenge you, when you have time, whenever that is, to really read the criteria. Again, they're not applicable to every application that comes before you. And some of them on this board are very qualified. It says should and not has. So there is a little bit of discretion in there. And I think that's where your guidelines come into play. But the two work hand in hand. That is a very long answer to the question, can you help them along? You can make a suggestion. They're not required to take it. If you don't like the railings, tough cookies, find another way to say you don't like the railings and that it doesn't meet one of the criteria. I mean, and maybe it doesn't. I mean, again, that's your opinion. You don't like it, maybe because you don't like it because it doesn't fit.
Well, you're right. I said I don't.
I know.
I don't think it fit.
Well, and then again, he's running into some issues too. And part of your criteria is that, you repair first and try not replace it. I mean, I think that specific example is something that you sometimes run into with windows and things too, is that they're just beyond repair. I would love to repair it. I would love to just add 6 inches to the bottom. But if I do that, the entire thing is compromised and I don't get what I had before. And it's not the original. Now I have to go find something that's either prefabricated or spend money to try and find something that they can, fabricate it to make it look identical to that. So, I mean, there are some other considerations.
Okay, but money should never be one of them.
Not necessarily. There are some instances in here where it does talk about, if it's, this is the only one of the boards that I think that money actually can come into play. So that has to do with the criteria, if I recall. But, the other thing too, is you don't necessarily want to deter people in the community and say, well, no, we have to have it absolutely original. And they're like, well, that'll cost $150,000. Well, too bad. And then the house goes into disrepair and now you've got, yeah, I mean, so I have the easy job. Y'all have the hard job. I think you do a good job of asking the probing questions. And I think at the end of the day, the hardest applications that come before you are the sign applications. And that's because you really don't have any wiggle room. And you can thank the United States Supreme Court for doing that for you. But yeah, look, I'm not here to tell, I am here to tell you no, but if you ask the question and I don't interrupt, keep asking. I'll let you know when you've gone a bridge too far.
If I may, just
We
one
can ask for
more
more
about the
than
sign that we do not approve tonight. You mentioned, an appeal. Does the appeal come back to us or to the?
It goes directly to the Board of Commissioners, and they are not bound by any of your criteria. They do not have to follow the historic guidelines. They can consider whatever they want in making their determination. I will say, having seen a couple of those appeals, they do take this board's recommendation to heart when they make those decisions. So
Go to the city.
The applicant must file for the appeal
it has to be a written
within
appeal.
20 days.
So, yeah,
How many days?
20.
20.
I don't think-
Okay. Anybody have anything else to say?
Here, we do have a public comment of it that they've had their hand raised
Oh, where?
in Zoom. If you would like, I can allow them in.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
You had them in Zoom?
Yes.
Hi. Y'all hear me?
Yep, we can
Yes.
hear you.
Hi, I'm Jackie Turner. I'm a resident at 792 Chesapeake Drive. Great meeting tonight, y'all. I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the presentation and on the Greek town as a traditional cultural property. It's quite informative and educational. And I guess it was more for the presenter and maybe city staff can help with this. Have they been in communication with the commission regarding their work to develop an updated comprehensive plan and strategic plan? Because I think this information would be vitally important to that process. And Pat, I know you said that you're going to be sending this presentation to the committee. Is there any way that this could also maybe be posted to the website or available to others? Because I would just be interested in having this. And again, more to the presenter, I didn't know if there was a way to bring this presentation to our citizens and to the city commission, maybe working with the library or the cultural center or the Heritage Museum to hold an event to share this knowledge. So that was all I wanted to say. And thank you again for the work that you've done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do you want me to respond to that?
Huh?
You want me to respond?
Yes, go ahead.
So the Greektown map, Tina did mention about putting things on the website. We do have the district map on the website, and we can certainly get this presentation up on the website. And I believe Tina is going to be talking with the board. I know she's been coordinating with Commissioner Vaticiotis on this. He mentioned it to me, so I think it will be coming to the board soon.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, anything else? Okay, I'm calling this one adjourned.
Good.
Time now is, what is that, 8:10? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you,
Thank you, everybody.
thank you very much. All of you,
Good job.
really good.
Meeting.